Meanwhile, on the global oil market, prices gave up gains this morning, falling more than 2%, along with broader financial markets after a media report cast doubt on the efficacy of COVID-19 vaccines against the Omicron coronavirus variant. The head of drug maker Moderna told the Financial Times that COVID-19 vaccines are unlikely to be as effective against the Omicron variant of the coronavirus as they have been against the Delta variant. Both benchmarks tumbled more than $1 on the news. Brent crude futures fell $1.82 to $71.62 a barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures dropped $1.61 to $68.34 a barrel. Well, oil plunged around 12% on Friday, along with other markets on fears the heavily muted Omicron would spark fresh lockdowns and dent global growth, hurting oil demand. The World Health Organization said on Monday Omicron posed a very high risk of infection surges, and several countries stepped up travel curbs. It is still unclear how severe the new variant is and whether it can resist existing vaccines. With the demand outlook under a cloud, expectations are growing that the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, Russia and their allies, known as OPEC+, will put on hold plans to add 400,000 barrels per day of supply in January. Pressure was already growing within OPEC+ due to meet on December 2 to reconsider its supply plan after last week's release of emergency crude reserves by the United States and other major oil-consuming nations to address soaring prices. Also weighing on the market is the prospect of a resumption of oil exports from Iran following upbeat comments from diplomats as talks resumed on Monday between world powers and Iran on reviving a nuclear pact. Okay, we'll talk more about the oil market and other developments in the commodities market space. Dumebi Iyeke, research analyst with financial derivatives company, joins us in a moment. Keep it here with us. This is Business Morning. All right, we're now being joined by Dumebi Iyeke, one of the research analysts with financial derivatives company. Hi, Dumebi. Good morning. Good to see you.
Thank you. You too.
Well, Omicron seemed to be rolling the market. We're seeing oil price coming down again after that little spike, you know, yesterday. So much uncertainty out there. And we also have President Biden saying he's prepared to even release more oil into the market. And then there's also the issue of Iran nuclear talk. So all of these uncertainty, you know, in the space out there, do you think, how do you think these will shape the global oil market going forward?
I think the first thing we need to establish is that oil markets are, you know, they move very much with sentiment. Anything that happens with OPEC or a top economy like the US or China would definitely see the impact on oil prices. The oil markets will definitely react. So clearly with the Omicron variant, this is clearly a huge threat. We're seeing some countries come out say they are, you know, they started issuing certain travel restrictions. There are fears of renewed lockdowns in some countries in Europe. Now there are, you know, heavy talks on the Omicron variant because there is a possibility of a widespread, and considering the fact that this is the festive period, people would love to travel, people want to spend time with family. So how are countries going to ensure that the spread of this virus or this variant is not as fast as what happened with the Delta variant? And clearly there are concerns that the vaccine won't be able to, you know, cushion the impact of this, won't be as effective as it was with the Delta variant. So there are question marks on the vaccine. There are travel bans coming up. There are talks of renewed lockdowns, and the oil market is, you know, reacting. And then on the part of oil supply, U.S. is being stringent on its, you know, decision, and that's just because, you know, it's a political thing happening with the U.S. Yeah, so elections are, you know, around the corner, and a huge determinant for a president to remain in power is if he's able to ensure that energy prices go down. And gasoline prices in the U.S. are at its peak, you know, almost $4 per liter, and that's very high. So the Biden administration is trying its possible best to make sure prices reduce, and the only way to do that is to increase supply into the market.
So I mean, with all of these uncertainty on it, what options now? I mean, OPEC is meeting, that will be on Thursday.
Yes.
What options are there?
I mean,
For
there are
OPEC
talks
Plus?
that OPEC, could decide to stop its supply, and that would be in response to this Omicron variant. But there's also the aspect that OPEC and the US and other countries looking to increase, pump oil into the market, like China and Japan, they would actually come to the table to actually have a conversation.
Well,
and
OPEC
have an
has never
agreement.
agreed with the US as for increasing the supply.
Yes, but right now there's a lot at stake. Because if it's that the US and China and Japan, I mean, if it's that they were holding on increasing supply, we could say, okay, there's somewhat of OPEC, remaining on its conservative stance and, just completely blocking out the US. But right now, there's a lot at stake. They have gone ahead to do this. And not only that, there's a variant that could also affect demand. So there's a lot of things happening, and there just definitely has to be some sit down, and a decision has to be made on what steps to take.
All right. Now, while US is pushing to bring down the price of oil, now looking back here in Nigeria, well, I wouldn't know now. Okay, if the oil price is going up, it's still okay for Nigeria because that would also help our reserves.
Yes.
And then if it's coming down, you and I perhaps may not have to pay much for petrol.
Yes.
Particularly now that the federal government is talking about, removing petrol, the fuel subsidy. Okay, that has been a debate. Particularly since the finance minister announced the doling out of 5,000. So what are you guys at FDC making of all of these things?
So there are two aspects to this. There is the impact of the removal of the fuel subsidy, and there is also the impact of the 5,000 naira stipend. So let's start with the impact of the removal of the fuel subsidy. So the big question around fuel subsidy is, number one, it has been a conversation that has been going on for years, and the question now is it really the right time to do it? Are we in the right place to actually take up this huge stance on removal of fuel subsidy?
But when we talk about right time to do it, when exactly is the right time
so
to do it?
getting to that, obviously there's almost no right time for you to do it, but the deal has to be, or the tiebreaker or the deal breaker is that you have to do what is necessary to encourage investments in your country, knowing fully well that you need that money. Not only that, you need the accolades, you need the investments, you need the infrastructure, you need to be able to make more money rather than relative to how much you are spending. So clearly all of those things are coming into play in the question of what the right time is to remove fuel subsidy. However, we're seeing that the world has clearly transitioned away from fossil fuels, and Nigeria is taking up the stand. So if anything, we're a little too late to the party. But I mean, better late than never. We're starting off, we're doing something about it now. The PIA has been, enacted. The president is saying, okay, or the FG is saying that we're going to remove fuel subsidy. So the impact generally, starting with the consumers, the first thing that's clearly going to happen is that the price of fuel is going to increase, possibly around 350 naira per litre. And when that happens, the people that clearly, make use of fuel, like people that can afford generator, that have a car, those people are not clearly the average Nigerian. So if anything, they could still, they could accept, or they could pay for PMS at a price of 350 naira per litre. But, obviously, their income is not increasing, so consumer disposable income is going to fall. And then for the people that, do not have a car or are not using generators in their house, they're still going to
because of the inflation.
Of course, and that's because transport costs will increase. So most of the commuting buses, that go in various states make use of fuel, not diesel. So they are going to still pay. And that's where the palliative now comes in. But still talking on the impact of the removal of fuel subsidy, for the government, definitely it means it's going to attract more investment in the downstream petroleum sector. Prices are going to be cost reflective, so that's an incentive for investment, and keeping our fingers crossed that all of this, would happen for the government and able to, increase revenue, and government to be able to meet its deficit financing needs. Now for the 5,000 naira stipend, it's a very ear-enticing thing. People look, oh my God, 5,000 naira, yay! But when you really look at it, if we look at it on the consumer aspect, 5,000 naira to the masses, or to the 40 million people that are going to receive it, who are extremely poor, according to the finance minister. I mean, it's a good thing for them, extra cash to be able to meet up certain things. They're able to serve as a social safety net for them.
But they're just about 1% of the GDP.
Of course, but at the end of the day, we're looking at the fact that, number one, these people receiving this money are they clearly need it. You know, it's important that they are able to cushion the impact of this impact of the removal of fuel subsidy. So if you have 5,000, if I give you 5,000 naira, or the government gives you 5,000 naira, that's probably data money for a day. But to that person who, you know, cannot even afford data, that 5,000 naira will be able to help spend that 100 naira from beggar to Ogba, you know, so it would come in handy. That's for the impact on. But then if we look at it on a wide, on a macroeconomic level, the government is doing this. This is almost about the same amount of money that is going, with the removal of fuel subsidy, of the amount the government spends on fuel subsidy. So it's almost like we're removing this money, but we're still injecting almost about the same thing. So that inflationary impact, it's still going to be there. There's still going to be the impact of money supply saturation, which would, you know, in turn stoke inflationary pressure. So what can the government do? So a suggestion, or one way to look at it is, number one, the government could, you know, CBN could increase interest rates. Why? That increases propensity to save. So someone like you, when interest rates is high, you will save, and that negates, or that cancels out the 5,000 naira that person is going to inject into the system. Then the other thing is the government could, you know, give this money as like bursary to schools. So in sense, like maybe a scholarship. So rather than give this money cash, say, okay, this person is going to be on scholarship for school, not for the amount of 5,000 naira, obviously, but for a reasonable amount of money that could cancel out the impact of that, cancel out the inflationary impact of that 5,000 naira that will be injected into the system.
What about channeling the money to other productive use? You know,
yes,
because it's a case of, okay, don't give me fish, just teach me how to.
Yeah, so if we look at it that way, so for the government is somewhat in a dilemma as to how much more to do, because the question, you really don't want people to push back on these reforms. Remember, we're not only removing fuel subsidy, we're increasing electricity tariffs. There's still going to be increase in food prices. Insecurity is still happening. Food is short. You know, so there's so many things happening to people. So when you take out this, you have to find a way to still rub their shoulders, say, okay, or rub their backs to say, okay, we're doing this, but there is some way you can, you know, still not feel the heat as much. And the truth is, when fuel subsidy is removed, the question on what the government uses the money to do is where we have to really have a very huge conversation about. Absolutely. Because if there is no corresponding improvement in productivity, we would not only see no trickle-down effect of this, you know, removal of fuel subsidy, but we'll definitely see a faster rise in inflation.
Well, I guess the government is in a dilemma now, but let's just see, once they are able to have that political will to actually remove the subsidy, then the next question is, okay, let's watch and see what exactly they do with this and how much that will impact the lives of many. All right, the year seems to be gradually coming to an end. This is the last day for the month.
December 1.
Absolutely, approaching Christmas. So take us through the commodities prices and what are we going to expect?
You know, typical of the festive period, commodity prices really increase, and that's because markets is usually hoard, because during the festive period, there's increased demand. So rather than, you know, buy new stuff, that's for the marketers now, rather than buy new stock, the inventory that they currently have, they would hoard it till the time demand is really high, and then that's where you see a significant increase in prices. But right now, prices are really high already. It could remain the same or possibly increase more, and that's because demand is going to be high. But we still have that impact of weak consumer demand. People are not exactly demanding as much as they would have during the festive season. So a repeat of what happened in 2020, December 2020, we could see that happen again.
All right. Maybe, thank you very much. Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Okay, we'll take a break now, and when we come back, we look at achieving food security in Nigeria with the use of biotechnology. To stay with us.